Good morning. The Assembly Senate Conference Committee on Water will convene. Let us take the roll to establish a quorum, please.
Steinberg.
Here.
Flores. Here. Padilla.
Here.
Pavley. Here. Cogdill. Here. Onnested.
Here.
Huffman.
Here.
Or Huffman, it's okay. Huff.
Here.
Bass. Here. Caballero. Fuller.
Here.
Jeffries.
Here.
Nielsen.
Here.
Solario.
Present.
Quorum is present, both houses.
A quorum is present for both houses, and thus the conference committee. Good morning to everyone. I'm very pleased to be co-chairing this effort along with my colleague, partner, the Speaker of the California State Assembly, Karen Bass. And we want to begin by making some opening comments to, of course, allow other members to make any opening comments as well. To briefly review how the legislation, which has been out in public for about the last 6 weeks, has changed as of today, and then to talk about agenda and calendar for the next 5 or 6 days and get the member input so that we can begin proceeding down a pretty well-defined work plan to meet the Tuesday at 5 p.m. deadline for signing a conference report and getting a conference report to the floors of our respective houses. And so I'd like to begin with a brief opening statement as to why it is so important that we gather here together today. 23 million Californians rely on the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta for water. Science shows that the Delta is dying from pollution and neglect. Water is being rationed, jobs are being lost, and fish are becoming extinct. The simple fact is this, and I think it's indisputable. California cannot grow its prosperity and jobs if we cannot ensure a reliable supply of water. That's why we are here today. We cannot make it rain, but we can share, we can store, and we can save water more effectively. The goal of this conference committee is to further develop legislation that does all three. Each bill in this committee has been heard in public, made available online, and in print. We all know the history of water. Past legislatures have spent decades talking about these issues. Now is the time for the legislature, on a bipartisan basis, to take action. We currently are in the midst of a drought that has made us much more aware of the fragility of our water system. California's farms, its businesses, and its communities are all feeling the effects. Over the longer term, in order for our state to grow and to preserve our quality of life, we have to find more effective ways to manage our water supply. The current situation has resulted in widespread water supply reductions and water rationing in most communities. Water for thousands of farms has been severely curtailed or cut off entirely. Commercial salmon fishing has been completely shut down for 2 years. Tens of thousands of Californians, from farm workers to fishermen, are out of work. Experts have warned that this is just a taste of what we can expect if we don't act now to protect and enhance our water system. At the heart of the state water supply system lies the Delta. Like a patient with heart failure, in almost every way this complex water system is in immediate crisis. The Delta ecosystem, a world-class estuary and a natural treasure akin to Lake Tahoe or the Everglades, is collapsing. Fish that once numbered in the millions are close to extinction. The water that is used to supply 2/3 of California is polluted by pesticides, urban runoff, and other contaminants. The hundreds of miles of levees that protect the state's water can collapse from a high tide or a collision from a ship. Scientists, blue ribbon panels, and public policy experts all tell us that the basic plumbing that feeds our farms and our cities can be cut off by a single earthquake or severely damaged by floods or by sea level rise. We cannot stake our economic and environmental future on a house of cards. The status quo is unacceptable. Inaction increases our risk and further degrades the environment. Delay and indecision doesn't mean that things will stay the same or get better. It only means things get worse. We have spent years, if not decades, talking about these issues. We've conducted studies, convened stakeholder groups, and experimented with a range of options. We've held hearings, written legislation, set up legislative select committees, convened special legislative sessions, and held many, many press conferences. The time for all that, it seems to me, has now passed. We have assembled the first truly comprehensive legislative water package in years. The package includes more efficient water management for our cities, the environment, farmers, and fishermen, greater protection for the unique ecosystem of the Delta, and reliable water supply for economic growth. Financing these improvements is an essential part of any final package. And just so there's no misunderstanding about the scope of the committee, we have scheduled a finance discussion for Friday and will not complete the conference process until we have a robust finance package. This is the most comprehensive package of water legislation in many decades in California since Pat Brown and the legislature approved the State Water Project back in the 1960s. To those who say slow down and wait, or who say these bills are being considered in the dead of night or behind closed doors, I say the following. It's only 9:20 in the morning. But besides that, we've held 12 hearings over the last 9 months, including 2 half-day hearings just last week. Each and every bill in this package has been reviewed in some form in policy committee, in joint policy hearings, and in informational hearings. Several have passed at least one house of the legislature. For the first 7 months of this year, the Speaker and I set up bipartisan, bicameral working groups of key legislators that met twice weekly, heard from an array of water experts and the administration's water staff. The authors of the bills themselves have convened hundreds of hours of meetings and drafting sessions to hear from all stakeholders and work on their concerns. And so we have our work cut out for us over the next week, but we can do it. The conference committee and the legislature as a whole will spend the next week determining if we can bridge our differences for the greater good of the people of California. And in the end, there will be enough in a comprehensive package in a way that I am confident that we'll be able to move forward successfully. Let's get this done, and let's get it done right. Speaker Bass?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to join in beginning this process by saying that when I came into office, and particularly was voted in as Speaker, made a commitment at that time that I thought it was absolutely critical that we do whatever we can to address the water situation in the state of California. Coming from Los Angeles, we obviously have our concerns there, given that 1/3 of the population of our state resides in the LA County area. But traveling early to the Central Valley with Assemblymember Juan Arambula and Nicole Parra and learning about the conditions in the Central Valley certainly showed me how important this issue is. And then Mr. Huffman, with the leadership that he's displayed in the Assembly on this issue, and traveling on the Black Hawk helicopter and in the speedboat through the Delta, and learning firsthand about the water crisis that we face in our state, has certainly given me a commitment to make this an absolute top priority, and along with Senator Steinberg, believe that we really cannot adjourn our session this year until we have addressed the issue and until we have all of these bills before both our houses. I want to thank, again, Mr. Huffman for taking the lead in our House, along with Assemblymember Caballero, who will be joining us in a few minutes, serving first as part of our water working group within the Assembly, but then also representing representing the Assembly in our bicameral process that has taken place over the last few months. In my view, as we finalize this package, we need to be mindful of the following. A solution must be crafted that achieves co-equal goals: a reliable statewide water supply. This must include drought response and relief for the impacted agricultural communities, the restoration of the Delta ecosystem while respecting the Delta communities. Our package must provide an effective governance structure which uses the best available science to resolve difficult issues and work with the multitude of local, state, and federal agencies with jurisdiction in the Delta. We will work diligently to address these important issues, providing water supply, taking care of the people of California, and protecting our environmental resources. I am glad we're beginning this process. We have an awful lot of work ahead of us, and I know, like my colleagues here, that we are committed to getting this done. If you think about the last year where we have been in the worst recession since the Great Depression, it hasn't been a very thrilling year. I mean, we have passed 3 budgets in the last year, and I've come to think of the budget as a quarterly process instead of an annual process. And with all that we have been through together over this last year, I think that this would be a wonderful way to end a legislative session, one having survived the worst economic crisis, but also coming together in a bipartisan, bicameral fashion and addressing one of the most important issues in California. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, happy to open the dais to other members to make brief opening comments. Senator Cogdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to make an opening comment. I commend you and Speaker Bass for calling together this conference committee to hopefully begin what may be the end of a process that has gone on now for many, many years, and you've certainly done, I think, a good job of laying out in your opening statements the problems that we face as a state of California relating to our antiquated water system and the need to address that. As you know, I and many of my Republican colleagues have been involved in this issue now for 3+ years, starting back with the governor's original water bond, SB 59, and trying over that period of time to continue to move forward on a comprehensive package that we think certainly goes a long way to addressing the co-equal goals of reliable water supply and at the same time doing what we can to maintain a viable ecosystem in the Delta and make the restorations that are needed there. Obviously, there's been a lot of things that have evolved over that period and a lot of study that's been done by the Blue Ribbon Task Force and the publishing of the Delta Vision and all of those things, which we have certainly taken a great deal of interest in and tried our best to incorporate into the evolution, if you will, of our proposals relating to infrastructure improvements. We would admit that we're a little disappointed in what we've seen so far as it relates to the work that's been done on the bills that are before us in conference, going back to the 3 meetings that we had as a joint committee with the Assembly, because we don't believe that they adequately address the co-equal goals. We understand the importance relating to the Delta and the restoration of the ecosystem, but we don't believe that the supposed co-equal goal of reliable water supply has been adequately addressed. So obviously that will be our focus as we move through the next few days and as we come up on Friday, looking forward to the opportunity to actually start to discuss how we move forward on these very important and necessary infrastructure improvements that have to be made in order for any of the rest of this to come together in a comprehensive manner to ultimately solve the problem and hopefully provide a water system that can meet the needs of 50 million Californians as we move forward and get away from what was built to meet the needs of 18 million Californians. So again, we're pleased to be here and to be part of this process and are ever encouraged and hopeful that we will ultimately get to the solutions that we need to for the betterment of the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Speaker. And I do want to start by thanking both of you for making this one of your priorities for this year. I think without your leadership and prioritization, we could never have come this far. And the fact that we are here in a conference committee with a chance, I think a good chance, to do something very historic at this critical moment for California water and for the Delta's ecosystem is a tribute to your leadership. So thanks very much for that. The first thing I did this year when I became chair of the Water Parks and Wildlife Committees, I had an informational hearing on the Delta crisis. I knew that that was going to be my highest priority for the year, and we heard from many witnesses, including the folks who spent 2 years laboring on the Delta Vision process, Phil Eisenberg and his colleagues. And I think it's important to remember that we don't simply jump into this Gordian knot of difficult issues without a huge body of work to build on. That 2-year effort that culminated in their strategic plan late last year, which was essentially embraced by the administration's cabinet representatives, provides a wonderful roadmap for tackling this crisis. It's a roadmap that is going to require all of us, regardless of our perspective, to come a little bit out of our comfort zone. But that's the kind of crisis that we have, and those are the kind of solutions that are going to be necessary if we're going to deal with it. I want to just quickly outline a few of the changes that have been made to the bill in this package that I'm authoring, AB 39. There are numerous technical changes, but among the more significant substantive changes, we have clarified that the in-stream flow determinations that need to take place before conveyance decisions are made, before the BDCP is certified, are preliminary determinations that the State Board will make to inform the BDC process. We think it's important that the State Board weigh in on what flows the Delta needs and what flows are necessary below any potential new point of diversion for the health of the ecosystem and the estuary before plans get too far down the road for any type of new conveyance. We have clarified that the conservation plan in the Comprehensive Delta Plan will be what is called for in the conservation bill that we are putting forward as part of this package. We have made the technical change that many have requested to have the Department of Water Resources actually certify the EIR for CEQA purposes. I think we understand that legally that's the way it needs to work, but we've retained the process by which the Delta Stewardship Council has final approval of that plan for purposes of integrating it into the Comprehensive Delta Plan and moving forward and actually implementing it. And we have worked on the co-equal goals. We've heard from many stakeholders that they thought that the co-equal goals were a bit ambiguous, and we have tightened that up. We've clarified that they don't trump existing laws such as the Public Trust Doctrine or the Endangered Species Act or other statutory enactments, and I think that will go a long way towards addressing many of the concerns we've heard. But again, we're in a work in progress. I look forward very much to the days ahead, and it looks like a pretty ambitious schedule. I'll inform my family about the weekend plans. But again, thank you very much. I look forward to working with all of my colleagues. Let's see if we can get this done.
Thank you. Are there other members? Ms. Fuller. Well, why don't we just go straight around and we'll get to everybody and give everyone a shot.
First, I'd like to thank you for convening this process, and I'm very hopeful that we will be able to finally bring the years and years of hard work by many of our past legislators to fruition in a comprehensive water bond bill that solves the problems on many levels for many people throughout the state. I know that we're a little bit short on time, and I would like to get to work, so I'm just going to say that we totally support Senator Cogdale's comments and his speech, and so rather than repeat it, I'll just say ditto. And as we move forward, I think our focus is that there have been many people standing on other people's shoulders to get us to this place. In 2007, we were very, very close, and if we can just make the touchdown, finally, those last few yards, I would be feeling like I've finally done something in the legislature that was really worthwhile for my state. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Sloria.
Thank you. Both great chair members that we have. I'm Jose Sloria. I represent Orange County. I want to, thank both our leaders for the great representation that we have on this conference committee. I'm one of those individuals that thinks that this process and these set of bills is something that impacts all Californians. I think every Californian is a stakeholder in this process and in these bills. I think they do offer good midterm and long-term solutions to our water crisis. And aside from this, I know there are other bills being considered in this House dealing with also short-term relief. You know, I right now live in Orange County, but I was raised in Kern County. My parents were farm workers, and I know that farm workers are going through very challenging times, and we need to be very mindful of the drought situation and the other water restrictions and their impacts on those communities in the Central Valley. I've been on a regional water quality control board for 6 years prior to being here. Also was on the Orange County Water District Board of Directors for several years. I recently also had the opportunity to start chairing a water select committee on regional approaches to addressing the state's water crisis. And sure, what we're doing here affects largely the Delta and other remedies for our water crisis, but I also think that regions themselves have responsibilities to conserve more, to think about their own storage capacity and be their own helpers in this situation that we have and which is so dire. So I look forward to working with everyone. I do think we have the opportunity for success. I definitely want to help facilitate success in this process, and I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. Mr. Niels?
Thank you, Pro Tem Steinberg and Speaker Bass. And I don't only compliment you for this conference committee, but for the Budget Conference Committee as well. I think you have opened the institution to the people's business in a wonderful way, and it is salutary to this reputation of our institution. This crisis is not a new crisis. In some cases, some elements of it are immediate, but they are also historic. When I became a senator representing a good portion of the Delta in 1978, there was a crisis. There still is a crisis. Many solutions, many things have been tried over many years. Our discussion, our debate, our crisis is not simply also about the Delta. The Delta is but only one part, a critical part, but only one part. The needs of all citizens of California are what we must heed and respect here today. Domestic, agricultural, business, industrial use, as well as environmental use. And none should hold sway over the other. They indeed should all be considered, deliberated, and established in policy in a co-equal way, which is in fact how it has historically been over the years. Through the 80s, I would say that environmental use didn't have as high a priority, but now it certainly has risen. And now it is indeed co-equal, but again, with those other very important uses. It is really critical that as we deliberate here, we do not get caught up in the minutiae of those single interests that prey and push upon us, but think of the good of all of the people of the state of California in terms of water policy. And as we set the relationships forward, understand that there are interconnectivities and there are concentric circles like the pebble in the pond of impacts of the decisions that we make here, and we must consider what will be the impact of our decisions 20 years down the way. And there is a trend in government now that it causes me some concern, and that is the overreaching power of bureaucracy that's become the fourth branch of government. We must be mindful of that. As we consider the bills, I would suggest that members should also consider previous legislation that has been considered in this body, like Senator Cogdill's. There are merit in some of those provisions, and I expect that we will be discussing them in a bipartisan way. Lastly, folks, we do have a wonderful opportunity here. Much debate and discussion has occurred over these many, many years and through these many crises, really dating to my first years in the Senate, even before. But a paucity of things have been constructively done in water, infrastructure for water in the state of California since the State Water Project. And those visionaries of that era, I believe that we should emulate and try to come up with our own vision, a bipartisan, bicameral one, which will take this water policy into the latter part of this century. That is our challenge. That is our opportunity. And thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you. Senator Flores?
Thank you. I do want to thank the Pro Tem and the Speaker for calling this. At the risk of aging Senator Nielsen, I was a staffer here when he was a senator, so it's ironic to be able to sit next to him on water policy.
And an honor, sir.
But let me just say a couple of things that Senator Nielsen made mention of. It was about a decade ago that I was chair of the Assembly Water Committee, and we had a room filled, something similar to this room. And I want to tell you, Mr. Pro Tem and Madam Speaker, that these issues are not new issues, obviously, but the challenge that you both have taken on today, that courage to take this on, is new. We've had the Monterey Accord, we've had state water contractors, we've had CalFed, we've had Prop 13 funding for water, we've had the Delta Vision Plan. We have had many, many opportunities as a legislature to address this on a comprehensive basis. I think this is the first time, I think in the 20 years I've been associated with this building, that we've had the Speaker and the Pro Tem actually call a joint committee together to try to tackle this. And people, I think, have said, as the Pro Tem said earlier, that this might be moving too fast. I will tell you this actually has been moving too slow. And I want to thank both of you for having the courage to move this forward. I'm not sure. I know there's a lot of skepticism probably for those who have sat in the last 2 decades and watched these debates. A lot of skepticism whether this is going to move forward. I do know that we have some very courageous leaders here, have gone through 3 budget sessions in 1 year, cut about as much as you can cut, and this legislature, I think Senator Nielsen will concur, has never gone through the types of changes it has in the last year. You two are the right to lead it, and I want to thank you for doing this. I would only say one thing, and that is simply that in order to accomplish this task, we have to take off our regional hats. We've got to take off our party hats. We've got to come to the room and recognize that we are Californians. And I think, as Senator Cogdell mentioned, we are living on a plumbing system that was made for 18 million people. We were going to be 50 million Californians very soon. It is not sustainable to somehow think that we can survive on a system made for 18 million people when we're going to have 50 million Californians. That water system will not take us very far, and I think it's time that we address that water crisis today, and I applaud you both for doing this, and I look forward to working in a very comprehensive manner to make sure this occurs. And I want, again, thank you both.
Thank you. Senator Padilla?
Thank you, co-chairs. I'll try not to be too repetitive of what's already been said. First of all, we won't outline all the outstanding issues. I think that's what this process is for. Everybody understands and appreciates the complexity and how daunting of a challenge it is that's before us. But I will offer to the group a couple of things, primarily the perspective that I both approached this discussion with, and I believe I offer to this process. Before I do that, though, let me just sort of piggyback on something Senator Flores just pointed out a minute ago, not just a recognition of the leadership of the Speaker and the Pro Tem designating themselves to this conference committee in co-chairing this effort, but if anybody out there is questioning how committed our legislative leaders in both houses are to getting something done this year, if any popular residents of the first floor of this building is questioning how committed we are to getting something done in the next 10 days, I think the fact that this conference committee, which is a big deal in and of itself, is being chaired by the 2 legislative leaders of the 2 houses is proof enough of how serious this effort is. Now, as for my perspective, similar to Senator Solorio, I come with a little bit of background before my arrival here in the legislature. I've only been a member of the Natural Resources Committee for this year, chaired by Senator Pavley. But in my 2.5 years here in the legislature, almost 3, I've certainly been part of a lot of discussions water-related, from conservation efforts, not just Delta discussions, but whether it's desalinization technologies or anything else. Prior to my arrival in the legislature, I served for 7.5 years on the Los Angeles City Council, both as a member and as its president. Most people familiar with Los Angeles know that it's serviced on the water side by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, not only the largest municipal utility in America, but a significant member of the Metropolitan Water District. Certainly, those two entities no slouches to the list of players involved in water discussions throughout the state. By no means do I offer that to be regional or territorial about it, as Senator Flores has mentioned, but both that is my background, but I believe it is helpful in understanding a part of the state that's important in the number of considerations that we're taking here: ecological, environmental, water reliability, and sustainability. Economic considerations, both locally and in around the Delta, as well as throughout the state. All these layers that I think as a collective this conference committee represents and contributes to tremendously. I've seen in my transition from local government to the legislature how much we truly are interconnected in so many ways, water being no exception. The other perspective that I'll suggest is valuable to this process is serving currently as the chair of the Senate Energy Committee, where a lot of the discussion, legislatively and otherwise, has been about what's the current pressing policy challenges for us in the field of energy and what the future is of energy and our energy infrastructure in the state of California. To best approach pressing current challenges and future challenges, it's wise to gain an appreciation for the past. And not too long ago, this state was in an energy crisis where we were evaluating energy supply, energy demand, and a upside-down difference in the two. Some of it had to do with our regulatory structure, who was calling the shots and making decisions. Some of it had to do with capacity, and it always has to do with economics. And we are still paying dearly to this day for not having avoided a crisis in the earlier part of this decade when it came to energy. Let's not make the same mistake when it comes to water. We're talking about the economics of water. We're talking about the environment around our water and the capacity and maintenance of our water infrastructure, where we find water, where we need water, not just for personal residential use, but agricultural use, business use, et cetera. What can trigger us into a crisis mode for water is different than what triggered us into a crisis mode for energy. For energy, it was, Enron and beyond. For water, it could be something as simple as a big enough earthquake in the wrong enough place for us. It could be not just a natural disaster, it could be a man-made disaster now that we're in the era of terrorism awareness in the United States of America, or a combination thereof. Let's not look back in 20 years or 2 years, having seen one of these crises, having crippled us when it comes to water, and be paying a dear, dear price as a result. If we have an opportunity to avoid that crisis and the costs that come with that, I think it's our responsibility to make the best effort to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Steinberg and Speaker Bass. It's an honor to be on this conference committee. Honored to participate in the process. Several people have asked me, half the people I talk to say that we're going too fast, the other half say we're going too slow. I want to share with everyone, again, and several people have mentioned it, for those of you, especially on the committee, who haven't read this Blue Ribbon Task Force report on the Delta, 2 years of work, a lot of stakeholders, an excellent job. It is a template for why we're here today and how we can get here, because a lot of this very good work has been done and reviewed by many, many people who have a lot of expertise in water delivery, water supply, and ecosystem restoration. I wanted to point out in the Senate a few of my colleagues who aren't on the conference committee that were very helpful in establishing many of these pieces of legislation, participating in the working groups. Assemblymember Huffman chaired one on the Delta Plan. I chaired one on governance. We had anywhere from 8 to 12 members, bipartisan, bicameral, every Wednesday for multiple weeks. But who is not participating today, but was instrumental in putting this all together, Senator Woke, Senator Simidian, and Senator Kehoe had joined Senator Cogdill and myself, at least from the Senate side, in a lot of good work. As chair of the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee, we've had multiple hearings over the last 8 months, anywhere on conservation and water management. If you didn't participate in our 4-hour hearing on water rights, you missed something quite interesting on 200 years of water right law in the state of California. And I do need to also acknowledge my staff from the Natural Resources and Water Committee, Bill Craven and Dennis O'Connor, who have spent really a lifetime of good, solid work on this issue. So we have some of the best and the brightest in the building that have been working on this. If it hadn't been for the budget, this would have been front page and visible the whole year. But I want to assure everyone that behind the scenes there has been hundreds and hundreds of hours work done in the two houses, in hearings and in working groups and in thoughtful policy discussion. My goal is a comprehensive approach to solving the problem of the Delta, a more reliable water supply, certainly restoring the ecosystem with establishment of the Delta Conservancy and others. I support Mr. Assemblymember Solario's comment on regional solutions. Absolutely critical to this piece of the puzzle. How can we reduce the stress on the Delta, become more regionally sustainable in the long term? I think with climate change and those other kind of variables that we will be seeing, plus increase of population, we're going to have to be a lot smarter on how we use water. So hopefully as part of this comprehensive package, better water management and conservation is also critically important. And Senator Padilla, who chairs the Energy Committee, knows full well that 18 to 19% of all the energy we use in this state is the moving and treating of water. So this is the beginning of discussion. Senator Steinberg, your opening comment, or you've said multiple times the status quo is not acceptable, is what brings us all here. This is a high priority issue, not only for myself, but the whole legislature. So let's get to work.
Assemblymember Caballero, we were just going around making short opening statements. If you want to weigh in, you're welcome to. If not, we'll move on. Go ahead.
I will make my comment very...
I don't think it is.
There. I will make my comments very short. I am very honored to serve on this committee with such distinguished members. Looking forward to the opportunity to get this done in a very, very short period of time. For me, so much of what we do is process. And so I'm here hoping that I recognize we've had a lot of hearings, we've had a lot of testimony, but whatever documents move forward will be, I'm assuming, revised a number of times, and I want to make sure we have an opportunity to have people see those documents, weigh in, and give us the best of their opinion on how we can make them the best that they can be. And what I am interested in is I have been receiving a number of letters with real particular information on what we need to do to make it a comprehensive plan, and I just want to make sure we have a process to be able to integrate that information, look at it, and take into consideration as many interests as possible, because there's no question that as we look at water in the state of California, every hydrological region has issues that are very different. Some that are dependent on the Delta, and others that are independent but have water management issues that confound them, and that we have the opportunity to help along the way, which is why I'm very interested in us considering the financing aspect of this as well as the governance. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words, and look forward to working together.
Of course. Mr. Jeffries?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here as well. Brief background, I'd served 16 years in a couple different water districts. And I represent the sort of the end of the pipeline down in western Riverside County and northern San Diego County, so I'm bringing some perspectives to this committee that will sort of represent the end users. However, I do share the view that we are all in this together. We either fix this together, address everybody's concerns, or we don't fix anybody's concerns. We cannot afford to pick winners and losers in the state in attempting to develop our solution, so we should do everything humanly possible to address all of the concerns. And with that, I'd let's break out the whiskey and get to work.
Senator Cogdill, would you like to make a second speech? No? All right. Here you go. Okay. Senator Onnested?
I was happy for Senator Caballero's remarks because the fact of the matter is there are very different regional issues, and I'm sorry, but I can't take off my regional hat, and I'm not going to. I understand, as the previous speaker just said, that we're all in this together, and we will all sink or swim together. However, let me just say that the North, the Delta, the Central, and the Southern areas have very different needs, very different resources, very different problems, some that can be helped by government and some that cannot. And I am not going to for 1 minute forget that the area that I represent, which is where 80% of the water that we're talking about falls on this state, has very different problems than the southern part of the state. And when we talk about what has to come out of this conference committee, folks, yes, it has to be a comprehensive plan, but it has to address the concerns and needs of all of the stakeholders. And that includes those rural areas that may not be so heavily represented on a population basis, but certainly is because of area of origin and because of geography and because, quite simply, when you're north of the Delta, our problems are totally different than what's south of the Delta. And I have to tell you that one of my misgivings, one of my disappointments already in the language that is going to be presented today as opposed to 24 hours ago is already an abridgment of some of the needs of my area of origin and some of that language which has been removed from the process. And maybe we can interject that back into the discussion. And so I'm not here to throw in a monkey wrench, but I want to tell you I am not going to take off my regional hat. We all have regional hats. We want to fix the Delta, and yet it's not going to be at the expense of abrogating area of origin water rights from the north. It's not going to be at the expense of having faucets turned dry down in the south. And so there actually has to be co-equal results. And when we use the word co-equal, I am talking about all of the different stakeholders involved.
Fair point. Thank you. Senator Huff?
Well, in doing wrap-up here, I'm gaining a new respect to my colleague to my right, talking about his parochial interests, and it reminds me that democracy has been described as two coyotes and a rabbit deciding what's for dinner. And hopefully that's not what's going to happen on this panel. And as I look around, I do see members from North and Central, South, representing ag, representing urban, suburban, and I think we have a good representation here. Having said that, we do have regional issues. We can't forget that. That has to be our highest priority, but it can't be at the expense of the other issues here. I received some communication from someone outside of my district that was at one of the panels listening to us last week, and interesting comments. So I gained new perspective. I resonate with the issues in my region. Sometimes I don't fully appreciate the other issues, but one quote was, "Wasting money on a canal is ludicrous when the money can be spent on trying to fix the problem."
Well, that's exactly what the canal is trying to fix the problem. It's the whole reliability issue of if there's the earthquake or the ship that compromises the levees and we flood the suburb, the islands that are below sea level, it takes 2 years to get water to Southern California. That, my friends, is a problem. And so as I look at this, I see our highest priority is being water reliability, and I will fight for that parochial interest, but not at the expense of the water rights of the North or the ag needs or whatever the other needs are. There's another quote that I thought was interesting also. We understand the need to have water, but stealing the water out of the San Joaquin Delta system is not the answer. Well, that goes back to what Senator Pavley was talking about, the whole water rights issue. That was a very interesting day of listening to the most convoluted law I've ever heard. But we need to sort it out. If this was easy, it would have been done already. It hasn't been. But I just want to close with this. I have one of the largest fires in California history raging in my district in Southern California, the Station Fire. They're not putting that out with good intentions. They're putting it out with a pre-plan and a lot of hard work and water. And when you think that the fish are suffering, as this letter talks about also, just wait till people don't have water to put out their fires or to ingest to sustain their own lives. This is a very important panel. I look forward to getting some things done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Huff, and to all the members. I think they were all fine comments. And look, the goal here is not perfection. The goal here is to craft a package of bills that, in fact, melds the needs of every region of California with looking out for the entire state. Like you know, I'm the leader of the Senate. I'm also a Delta senator. I come here with that hat on, too, and will relay that perspective and fight for that perspective throughout. But the challenge for all of us is how we meld who we represent, where we represent, with the larger picture. And in fact, we do stand on the shoulders of others. We're not creating original work here, whether it's Delta Vision, whether it's investment strategies that have been put forward in previous legislatures. We do not start from scratch. So here's what we want to do now to get to work. We want to have some discussion about schedule, which the speaker will help lead. What I want to do here is identify sort of the big picture, the outstanding issues, and then just briefly relay the status of the current bills and contrast them, as Assemblymember Huffman did a few moments ago, with the versions that have been out in print for the past number of weeks. So we all just start from the same place. And then we will talk about calendar and agendas going forward. Fair enough? All right. Here are the large issues as we see them. Obviously, key issue, maybe the key issue, is BDCP integration with whatever governance structure we establish. The issue of who certifies the EIR. Assemblymember Huffman has already indicated that the current draft of his bill changes the lead agency to the Department of Water Resources. The co-equal goals definition. Major subject of discussion because of the concern about its legal import from both sides and from the Delta side in terms of it not being expansive enough. The draft of the bills now differ from the bills that have been out in print in that they state the co-equal goals one time, but then remove the references throughout and have the savings clause, if you will, that co-equal goals does not change or impact any existing law around water. And you'll correct me. Somebody will correct me if I misstate anything here. There is the issue of council membership, which of course also related to council authority. We're talking about the Delta Stewardship Council as it's described in the bills. There's the issue of the water master. The language has been changed in the current version of the bills to describe a water master, but without going into any detail about what his, her, or its actual authority will be, to be discussed or to be delegated to an appropriate, to an appropriate future process. On in-stream flows, the sixth key issue, which basically, as I understand it from a layperson's perspective, how do you identify or agree on how much water will flow for what purpose before any big decisions are made about conveyance? On that issue, the drafts have been clarified to, I think, more clearly differentiate between interim flow issues, between how we deal with these issues in the interim and how we might deal with them on a permanent basis. Mr. O'Connor, you're looking fuzzy at me there. Was that all right? Okay, good. Just correct me. It's all right. 7, agency consistency determinations and the enforcement authority of the council. There's the relationship of the BDCP to the council. Then there's also the relationship of all else relating to the overall water plan as it affects the Delta and what the authority of the council should be. Should it be an appellate body, if you will? Should it have more plenary authority? Big issue to be just not only discussed but decided in the context of this discussion. There's the issue of whether or not the bills should call for a reduced dependence on the Delta, to make it clear that the Delta can't be the be-all and end-all for all of the water challenges in California, and the language from the draft, from last drafts, remain as is. There's the issue of the relationship between the Delta Protection Council and the Stewardship Council. Delta Protection Council is a very important body that protects the integrity of the Delta. And its relationship to the Stewardship Council and the importance of its recommendations, its decisions to overall statewide decisions needs to be discussed. And over a day or two, we'll be ready to present some compromises that we think will hopefully work. There's the issue of the Conservancy, which many of us believe is an essential piece of an overall package. But there is some controversy over Conservancy's authority and whether or not it should have the ability to own land. Currently, under the draft, I believe there is no such authority. That's something that needs to be discussed. The science program. Everyone seems to agree that there needs to be a robust science panel. And I believe that that issue that the pretty much consensus language is now part of the new drafts. Finance. Dave Cogdill leaves the room just when we're talking about finance. Finance. Obviously, a key issue that will be discussed on Friday. Everything will be discussed. And hopefully in the next several days, there'll be some ideas that begin floating here to the top that get to our conference committee by Friday. And I know Assemblymember Caballero has done a very good job of putting out some important ideas here. Number 13 is the issue of groundwater reporting and water rights management. The 4-hour hearing that Senator Pavley and Senator Huff described a moment ago, we probably won't spend 4 hours in conference committee, but it is an issue that we would like to get resolved as part of this overall process. And last but not least is the issue of conservation, which is, in many of our views, an essential piece of an overall package. And so that's a summary of what I believe the key issues are, but also to inform the public that we have made some significant changes to the bills to reflect the public input that we heard in the week since the preprints, as they're called, went public. I would remind members of the public as well that drafts of the bills themselves are available in hard copy in the Assembly and Senate committee offices. Electronic versions of the proposed conference reports are available online on the committee websites. We invite the public and obviously the members and the stakeholders to read them carefully so that when we resume the conference committee, whether it be later today or tomorrow morning, we can begin then framing the choices on each of these difficult issues and begin having the appropriate discussion, hear the public input, and eventually make some decisions. Speaker Bass, on the calendar and the agenda.
Members, you have in front of you the Water Conference Committee proposed schedule, and I wanted to just walk everyone through this. And what I'm looking for here is input from members in terms of what you might like to see covered, the timing, et cetera. So as Assemblymember Caballero spoke a few minutes ago, to make sure that the process is inclusive, I've met with members of the Assembly who want to make sure that their viewpoints are covered, whether they sit on this panel or not. And so walking through today, we talked about reviewing the revisions to the bills that have been made since public testimony, identifying the key outstanding issues, and then we would adjourn and ask staff to develop options for these issues, and then we might meet again later on today. So, and I believe everybody is aware of that. We would meet tomorrow at 3 p.m. or upon adjournment of both houses, and we would have a public review and comment on all of the bills. So we would ask the administration to present their comments on the bills. We would look for public testimony on all of the bills that are before the conference committee, and then we would adjourn and ask staff to summarize for us. On Friday, and we are talking about an intense schedule here, with the goal being to complete this process and have the members of the conference committee sign the report by Tuesday. So that has us meeting over the weekend. On Friday, we would focus on financing issues, and I know Friday is when we would be talking about the bond and other issues related to that. There would be presentations made from several people and an opportunity for public comment. On Saturday, we would review the presentation, review and have presentations on the outstanding issues and options for resolution. We don't have a time set for Saturday. And on Sunday, we would do the same thing. So we don't have our time set for Saturday and Sunday, but I'm assuming we would meet probably around the same time, 10 o'clock each day, and go as long as it takes. On Monday, the conference committee would be looking at the final summation, public testimony, and identification of any final changes to the conference committee reports, preparing us for Tuesday, making final comments, and signing the conference committee. So, signing the report. And so my question to members of this panel is this okay? Is this comprehensive? What is missing? What is your input? What are your thoughts? Mr. Nielsen.
Madam Speaker, if I may, I would request that about staff meeting, that would include meetings with Republican and Democrat staff too, that there be some working together of Democrat and Republican staff.
Well, we want this to be bicameral and bipartisan. Absolutely. Other comments? Input?
Madam Speaker, I think it's an ambitious schedule, but we got no other choice. We got to hunker down and get it done. So I'm prepared to go through the weekend, go late into the nights, whatever it takes.
Okay.
Very good. So what our intention here now is to be on call of the co-chairs with the possibility that we will meet later in the day or tonight. And the trigger there is that we want to make sure that the members, the staffs, and the stakeholders have sufficient time to read and review the new drafts, and for our staffs working with stakeholders, members, and staffs to be able to come back with an options list for each of the items that we have discussed. Now, some, again, by virtue of calendar, we're going to delay until Friday, for example, the finance piece. But on On the other outstanding issues, we need to begin getting into the meat of the relationship between the BDCP and a council, the authority of a council, the water master issue, and all of the other issues that we laid out. Is that? Oh, I thought you were. Sure.
Mr. Solaria.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd be very interested in at some point is having, if possible, a representative from the administration. I know there's been some dialogue with them about what ideas or suggestions they may have regarding the bills and the financing. I think it'd be important for the committee to hear directly from them on any thoughts.
And we do have plans for that tomorrow.
Very good.
You know, one other thing that I would like to say to committee members, if there are stakeholders or representatives of the public that you want to see here, you should definitely invite them. Just let us know when they would be coming, when there would be an opportunity for them to give public testimony, because we want to make sure that whoever is interested has an opportunity to speak.
All right, is there anything else? If not, we will stand in recess. Thank you all very much.